All right, hello and welcome everyone. We are so glad you're here. Thanks for joining us today. I am Melissa and I'm located in Texas and I will be kind of here in the background helping Todd out a little bit. Todd is also here. That's who you see on screen right now. I'm going to hand off to Todd and he can go ahead and introduce himself and then we'll get going. So thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Well, glad to be here. My name is Todd Taylor, and I have a number of titles. One of them is my business card for Adobe says that I am a pedagogical evangelist. And so I imagine most of you out there are with me in that enterprise, committed to transforming teaching and learning. My other title is the Eliason Distinguished Professor of English at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where I've been teaching for about 22 years. And so in the chat pod are two links, and we will return to some links so that you can access some resources that we're going to mention throughout this presentation. I'm going to switch over to Chrome, and we're going to spend most of the time working in something called Adobe Spark. So you won't see my face much for the rest of the program. This is, again, easy lesson plans and video content in Adobe Spark. And I've already introduced myself. And the destination or the purpose of today is to promote learning outcomes in any class by producing engaging, accessible digital content that leads to transformative student experiences. And so you may have thought that this is going to be an instructional support or a technology seminar, but really this is more about pedagogy than it is the technology itself. And so think about our destination today is really transforming student experiences through the use of some pretty powerful technologies. You will leave today's webinar with at least the possibility to develop two actual assets. One is going to be a lesson plan template that you're going to make in Adobe Spark page. And the second piece is going to be a very rudimentary, easy audiovisual video made in Spark Video. Spark Video is free to all. It is cloud-based and it is accessible and responsive, which is why we're going to start there. Well, how did we get there to this place we are today? This is certainly quite the moment in terms of our world and our history, and especially education. Many of you are probably experiencing or working with people who are suddenly doing what we would call emergency remote teaching. And so the context of what we're going to do today is going to talk about effective and best practices for teaching with these technologies, but it certainly needs to respond to the context of the last month when education is being so radically and abruptly transformed. And so as a frame around all of this, we need to think about where we are and how we got there. The first thing I'd like to sort of put in this frame is to separate concepts of online or distance learning from emergency remote teaching. What we're going to do today can work for both environments, but it's very important that if you're not an experienced digital or online instructor, you don't feel a lot of pressure to make your course, the digital experience of your course, perfect and wonderful today, because if you're doing this very suddenly because of the situation regarding the closing of so many schools, then the best you can do is to try to mimic the kinds of outcomes and practices you were going to normally have, but do that in a very simplified technology way, not trying to do anything that's too complicated. The video I'm actually going to be making today extends from an article I published over 20 years ago that outlines principles for instructional technology. And those principles are still relevant today, but we need to look at them carefully as we venture into these new and innovative territories. The first three principles from that article are what we want to keep in mind as we begin the webinar and the experience today. The first is to keep people first, to use these incredibly and increasingly powerful technologies to bring people together. The classic mistake when it comes to instructional technology is for the tail to wag the dog, and for us to get so wrapped up in the hardware and the software and the applications and to trying to make everything work, trying to make our Zoom classes work, that we forget why we're doing so in the first place. The goal, the destination, again, is to transform teaching and learning, to deliver on the outcomes that were part of your class, regardless of whether or not you're suddenly revising it. And so we want to be sure that we're focusing on human beings. And in the case of emergency or remote teaching, that means taking care of your students in ways you might not normally think about, and certainly taking care of yourself to not put too much pressure on yourself, which is why also I put this webinar together on Spark, because it is just that. It is a very low threshold, very easy to learn application that has lots of ubiquitous functions and possibilities, and it's very good at trying to avoid the mistake of the tail wagging the dog. So we can use Spark to deliver effective pedagogy and not so much become focused on digital instruction itself. The second piece is to start simple. That's why we're starting in Spark. Spark is the simplest digital educational application I know of. And while we're doing that, we then also want to focus on pedagogical principles and learning outcomes. If you are suddenly changing your course, your outcomes don't change. It's just the way you're going to get to those outcomes that might be a little bit different. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about specifically content. There's lots of different dimensions to instructional technology, distance learning, face-to-face learning, and asynchronous learning. And a lot of that has to do with with people interacting, with discussion forums, with live conferencing, and that is a topic for another week in this webinar series. What I've been asked today is to think about how to make dynamic content that helps support transformative teaching and learning. And the vocabulary that a lot of people use to think about this are the two terms affordances and limitations. With whatever choice you make as an instructor, not just which technologies you use, but how you use them, certain choices are going to afford certain possibilities and simultaneously limit them. And so we want to look at this frame. We want to talk about the affordances and limitations of what we're looking at today. Adobe Spark Page creates cloud-based microsites, in other words, mini web pages. Its affordances are that it is cloud-based, so you can access it from pretty much any device with internet connectivity. It's free. There is no fee. There's no subscription. Everyone in the world can get free access to it if they're not in a country that has a firewall. It's extremely easy to learn. It's the easiest educational technology I know of. It's easy to share for both your students and yourself, and it works well on any device. And so we have to consider that some students may only have a smartphone. And how are they going to be able to interact with your content if that's all they have available to them? Spark Video has all the same affordances of Spark Page. What it's good at is creating really short narrated slideshows. So if you wanted to create a 3-minute, maximum maybe 5-minute video talk or a lecture or a presentation of any kind, and you basically just wanted to narrate slideshows, that's what Adobe Spark is good for. Now, with these applications, as with any application, there are many paths to God. There are other applications that do similar things. And so by putting your hands on and seeing what Spark can do, you can make an educated decision as to what might be the right solution for you. Adobe Spark Video is one of 3 video editors in Adobe Creative Cloud. There's also Adobe Rush, which does full multi-track simple video editing, and Adobe Premiere Pro, which is a full-feature professional grade video editor. Those two, Rush and Premiere, are part of a subscription to Adobe Creative Cloud, whereas again, Adobe Spark Video is completely free. And so to kind of pull this together in terms of a pedagogical concept, I like to think about the concept of integrity, of all the pieces of my work as a classroom instructor coming together and holding together. And again, the long view for me, what I'm trying to do in all of my classes is I want to move myself and students away from being passive, disconnected consumers of content. I want to move them toward being active, connected producers of ideas, which is why engaged, active pedagogies are what I have found to be in all the research and all of my experience to be the key to critical thinking, critical problem solving, and student success. And so if you think about this, you're looking at a picture of someone who's spinning clay on a wheel, and I like how this creator's hands are getting dirty. I like to think about integrating these kinds of digital technologies as maker tools in the student experience in order to promote student digital literacy and transformative learning by modeling creative knowledge production practices myself. In other words, when you go to create um, a Spark page, a Spark lesson plan, or a Spark video, you're modeling for students a way of making knowledge that hopefully they will be able to imitate, and they'll start using Spark themselves. In other words, in a sort of slogan, I want students to get their hands messy, producing and sharing something that solves problems and matters, something useful to them. And so, in introducing Adobe Spark, which is now on the screen, um, the idea is that we could go through a workshop, you could go down a worksheet, and you could make something in Spark that you may or may not have a connection to. But in order to demonstrate this kind of concept of how to approach these technologies, well, I'm going to walk everyone today through making a lesson plan template in Adobe Spark, and then a quick lecture or talk in Spark Video. And so um, I don't suggest that you try to follow along in Adobe Spark right now. This webinar will be recorded, but you'll probably get the hang of it just watching sort of the simple moves I make. And so I'm going to actually, from scratch, make what I'm going to call a lesson plan template. And then the idea with that template is every time you want to create another lesson plan, you just duplicate that template and revise it for a particular lesson. And so I am in Adobe Spark. Adobe Spark is actually 3 applications in one. It is Adobe Spark Page, which, as I said, makes web pages. It's Adobe Spark Post, which makes graphics and illustrations. And it is Adobe Spark Video. And so if you want a subscription or a Spark account, all you have to do is go to spark.adobe.com and register to create your free account. If you are going to install those applications on a mobile device, you actually have to install 3 different applications: Adobe Spark Page, Adobe Spark Post, and Adobe Spark Video. And so if you're on a mobile device right now and you wanted to create Adobe Spark, go to the App Store, download Spark Page, and you could do what I'm about to do right now. I see there's a question here. I'm going to see if this technology works. So the question is, will there be a recording? And the answer is yes. Good. All right, so here we go. In Adobe Spark, you have this interface here. In the top left-hand corner of the screen is create a project. And basically all you have to know in Adobe Spark, as compared to more complicated sort of applications, is that if you ever want to add something, look for a plus button and click the plus button and you can add something. If you want to change something, edit something, click on it, and usually the instructions or what to do next will pop up. If not, then there's probably a button somewhere on the screen with instructions for what to do. We're going to create a project right now, and the way I'm going to do this, and I hope this isn't sort of frustrating for some of you who might be technologically advanced, is I'm going to actually kind of pause and ask you to imagine that the screen that I'm sharing right now is actually yours, to try to get you to think through which buttons to push and which choices to make to get where you're going. And so we clicked create a project. If you're going to follow what we're going to do and create a web page, what would you click on now? Obviously web page. And here we see we can create a video. We're going to do that later. You can create all different kinds of assets. But today we're going to create a web page, and then it takes a second, and now we're in the interface of Adobe Spark Page. And as you look at this interface, it's pretty simple. There are these tools at the top: settings, preview, present, share. There's this option in the top right, themes, and there's a plus button. That's basically all there is to it. Whenever you want to add something, you click the plus button. I'm going to add a title to this, and so I've just clicked on this, and we're going to call this lesson plan template. And I'm just going to leave a space here for course number. Now, if you're looking at this, it clearly is begging for something. It's begging for an image. It's begging for some graphics. And in order to do that, think to yourself, if I wanted to add some image or graphics right now, what would I click on? And so I told you earlier, the answer to most questions is click the plus button. You click the plus button, and you click on photo, up pops off this amazing menu where you can upload photos. You can search through Adobe Stock for licensed photos. But what most students and faculty want to use is the find free photos. These are high resolution, high quality, uh, fair use images that are in a database. And so I'm typing in a search term. I've typed in the word curtain, and it's going to go out on the internet and it's going to search for high quality, high resolution, fair use images that are free for me to use as an educator or a student, right? And so I typed in the word curtain because in my lesson plan template, I'm going to use this metaphor of a theatrical production to think about how I want to organize a class session. So I've typed on curtain, and I've clicked on a curtain that I like the image of, and now that is the sort of cover to my Spark page. Um, Now you want to think to yourself, okay, I want to start adding text to this resource, to this web page. What would you do next to start adding text? Well, at the bottom of the screen, it says scroll to start writing your story. So I'm going to scroll, and up pops the familiar plus button. I'm going to organize my lesson plan template according to 5 different sort of acts or movements, if I'm going to use the theatrical metaphor. So I'm going to click on the plus button. Then I'm going to click on text. And in all caps, because it's sort of a header, I'm going to type in Prologue as the first piece of my lesson plan. Then I'm going to select that text, and I want to make it bigger, and I want to make it center. So when I select it, up pops these options, H1, H2. H1 seems like it's going to be pretty big, so I'm going to pick that, and then I'm going to center the text. And then I'm going to add 3 acts to the structure of this template. Act 1 is going to be what I call watch 1. And I'll explain what that means in a minute. I'm going to do the same thing to format this text. I'm going to select it, click H1, and I'm going to center it. Then I'm going to click on the text again. I'm going to type in Act 2. Do 1. And I'm going to do the same formatting. And then in Act 3, I'm going to type in Teach 1. And so what I'm doing is I'm trying to put together a generic lesson plan template, a structure or skeleton that would be applicable for any kind of class. Doesn't matter what you're teaching, biology, chemistry, humanities, social science, doesn't matter. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to type in epilogue. All right, and same formatting and center. All right, and so now I've got a structure to this template. And what I have in mind is something that I actually heard from friends of mine who went to medical school, that when they're in medical school, they get to a certain point where what they're learning are procedures that they need to perform. And the way they learn those procedures is they work with a mentor, a doctor, who demonstrates how to do the procedure. They watch the procedure. Then the second time they experience the procedure, they do the procedure in collaboration with the leader. And then once they have had some experience doing the procedure, the point at which they really learn that material or that experience, or in this case, that procedure, is they then in turn teach it to another medical student, right? And so to me, that's how active, engaged learning really happens. At the beginning of a class session, they're kind of looking at me, and I'm kind of setting the table. And then in the middle of a class session, I want them sort of in collaboration with me, working through problems and working through ideas. But eventually they're going to be teaching or reporting what they've discovered in that class session. And I want every single class session I have, whether it's online, whether it's face-to-face, whether it's synchronous or asynchronous, to ideally have that kind of movement to it, like the movement of a theatrical production. I also want there to be a prologue where I set up the day and an epilogue where I set up the day, right? And so um, here is a final version of this lesson plan called How to Write a Effective Lesson Plan, a Play in 5 Movements. And the prologue contains these elements. It announces that the action's about to begin. It establishes a theme or a focus for the day. It describes what students will get from the session. It outlines the activities for the day, and it connects this lesson to previous lessons in the course. Act 1, as I said earlier, is watch 1. It's more often teacher focused. You're establishing key terms, principles, and ideas. It models a way of thinking, reading, writing, creating. It extends previous thought and prepares students for what comes next. Act 2, do 1. Like these students writing on a board, students and faculty are now speaking kind of equally. The focus isn't necessarily on an instructor in the front of the room, whether that's a virtual room or a face-to-face room. The focus now starts to move from consumption of content to the application of the idea. Students learn the concept through guided and supervised application. Monologue gives way to dialogue. An instructor gives feedback through each stage or step of the exercise. And now students are getting prepared to apply the concept independently. So in the third part of the lesson plan, they're going to be teaching it to themselves and to others. The focus is now within the class space itself, no longer the front of the room. Knowledge and ability transfer to other contexts is emphasized, and students gain clarity and confidence by witnessing their development as they go through it. And the focus is on new ideas and developing new talents and to apply them into additional contexts. And I do a lot of consulting and with faculty development and teaching pedagogy courses, especially to graduate students who are new to teaching. And this is the one of the most common mistakes that new teachers have is they have a lesson plan. It's full of ideas and it's full of activities, but they then fumble at the end and they rush through and they don't take a moment to stop and pause and reflect. And so I want to be sure that in my lesson plan there's a theatrical curtain going down that signals that the session is ending, that gives a chance to reflect, that creates a current, that connects the current lesson plan with the previous one and says, asks them to anticipate where we might be going next. And it specifically outlines tasks, responsibilities, and homework to prepare for next time. And so if we want to end with the curtain down, the beginning of the lesson plan is the curtain rising, where we're making sure everyone's together and everyone is focused. And so that's the pedagogical principle that has informed the way I put together my lesson plan template. Now you may have another way of doing this, another thought for putting these things together, and that's great. The idea here is that once you create a kind of a template, you create it and recreate it and revise it in a customized way every time. Now this template right now, this Spark page, is pretty dull. It's one image and a bunch of text. And so if we wanted to have, we wanted to add an image here, we could click on photo and we could type in the word teacher because that's focused on the teacher. And so I just quickly found a picture of a teacher in the front of the classroom. And we've now integrated that picture into this assignment. I don't like the way this picture is just kind of blocked out in the middle of the page here. If I click on this, I find that I have different options for formatting this picture. I can click on fill screen and it looks like this. I can click on window. I can click on full width. I actually like window here to kind of separate this chunk of text from this other one. And so that's a different way to format graphical elements in these pages. They're even more than just adding images. I can add video, I can add hyperlinks, I can add text that becomes a hyperlink. A lot of people like a split layout where in one side, if I want to add a picture of, let's say now I want to add a picture of the students, I can do so. And here we have students who are working together. And then over on this side, I can write a narrative, a textual narrative that complements the visual narrative on the other side, right? There's also this pretty cool function called a glide show. And I'm going to type in the word learning, or actually I'm just going to pick a different student version. Now, glide show is a little bit more sophisticated of an animated experience, so it takes a minute to process. Once it's done, I click save. But now I have this pop-up where I can add anything I want. I can add videos, I can add more text, I can even add more images within it, right? And so there are all these different options for formatting and creating a very elegant, very easy to use and access web page with obviously no web building or coding skills whatsoever. So it's as easy as clicking the plus button and playing around with all these different options. You get the hang of it very quickly. What I've shown you is probably enough for most of you to get going. We are looking at this in edit mode, however, all right? And so your students or whoever you send this web page to won't see it in edit mode. They won't see these plus signs. They won't be able to add things to it. And so we can click on preview mode, and it'll take a second to process this. But preview mode gives you a sense of what this is going to look like from the student perspective. And so this will be a little bit jumpy while it's streaming, but this is a really elegant, really cool experience that has what's called parallax animations and graphics, right? And so let's imagine you've edited this. This is exactly the way you want it to be. Now you want to share it. But hey, wait a minute, what happened? I don't see any plus signs anymore. I'm not in edit mode. And so in the top right-hand corner is an X to get back out of preview mode, back into edit mode. And then look at this interface for a minute. Let's say you're done with it and you're ready to share it. What would you click? You click the share button. I didn't also point out that there are these themes here too. They're sort of templates for basic ways of putting things together. I'll just quickly change it to something different and you'll see how it changes the font and some of the animation interaction. I like this one crisp. You'll like something different, I'm sure. And so that's one feature. People ask, how can I change the font? There's not a lot of really customizable changes that you can make beyond the themes. And there's a good reason for that. And we'll explain that in a minute. So we're ready to share it. We've got our themes the way we want. We've got all of the content the way we want. To now share this, you just click the share button. You click on publish and share the link. Pick a category. I always just pick education. You can toggle on or off your name. I tend to toggle the name off because it gives me a little bit more privacy. And then you click create link. And what you're doing is you are literally creating a web page. It's out there on the internet, it's public, and you now can copy that URL. You can email it to people, you can post it in social media, and most of you are going to want to post it in your LMS, your learning management system, such as Canvas or Blackboard, just like you would post any sort of web resource. And so now what I have developed is an entire series of lesson plans for every course as Spark pages. So I can put this into my LMS. So every day students in class can follow along with the lesson plan, and afterward they can come back to it. And then I put lots of information in the beginning and the end of this, such as, reading assignments, homework, what to bring to class, and what to prepare for next time. And so this becomes the container or the detailed container for all of the line items that were on my syllabus in terms of each class meeting. So now that I've developed this lesson plan template, I want to use it over again and again for different courses. And so this is not intuitive, but in the top left-hand corner, there's the Spark icon. And when I mouse over it, it changes to a home icon. And I click on that. And now I've gone over to the place that has all of my Spark projects. And so I have the lesson plan template here that I just created. And let's say I'm happy with that. I've got it fully developed. And I want to duplicate it. So if I click on these three buttons right here, I'm sorry, I'm going to click on projects, and then I click on these three buttons right here. I just duplicate that. And I can now call this whatever I want. Lesson plan, March 31st, and whatever the course is, English 100. And now I've taken that template, I've duplicated it. It takes a second to process. And now I'm going to come back in here. I'm going to edit this project. And I can say, okay, well, what we're going to do today in this class is we're going to read this assignment and you're going to do these exercises. And then we're going to move on to reviewing drafts of your report in work, right? So I take that template and I change it every time. One thing that I didn't show you in the last assignment is that after you make changes to a link and a web page that you've created, you can simply go back and update that link, right? And so, I just put in all this gibberish typing, placeholder typing. Now I'm going to go change it and say read pages 100 to 105. And now that I've made that change, when I go back to the share button and I go back to publish and share link, it now says update this link. And so all I have to do is click update that link. And the URL that I already created for that page stays the same. In other words, once you create a lesson plan, you put it in your learning management system, or you email it to your student, or you share the URL with them. You simply, again, you just copy the URL. Once you share that with them, if you want to go back and make changes, if you want to adjust your lesson plans, let's imagine you had already put together all your lesson plans for this entire semester, and then all of a sudden you have to teach remotely. You don't have to go back and change those URLs. You just have to update those links, and the URLs will stay stable. Stay stable. There we go. And so this is what my lesson plan template looks like. I used it for today. If you think about what we did to start out the day, we started on the epilogue, setting the context. Who am I? What is the goal and the theme for the day? The goal is transformative student experiences. And then we talked about the pedagogical principles, what we were going to accomplish, what you're going to leave with. And the idea is that now once you go and you put your hands on a Spark page and you try to create your own lesson plan template, that's the moment at which all of these things are going to come together. So we went from watching me talk about it to setting you up so that you can then go teach it to yourself. And the idea here is it's at that moment that you are actually creative problem solving. You're making, you're creating, you're sharing, that this is really going to have depth and meaning for you. And after seeing what's possible now, and by the way, I'm sure you could probably tell that everything I do now is in the Spark page. All the presentations I give professionally now are not in Spark decks, but Spark pages. Um, if you start sharing your lesson plans and some of your course materials this way with your students, then they're likely to pick this up themselves. In fact, I've had a lot of success with developmental writers in a remedial writing class when I moved away from asking them to do the same kind of intellectual academic work in Spark Page instead of in a word processor, because there's something about the engagement and the activity of creating, and I think most importantly, sharing, that becomes transformative for them. So even though today we're talking about developing content, the kinds of content that you develop and share is going to potentially have an impact on the way your students see getting their intellectual work done, which is why Adobe Spark is such a potential game changer because in that developmental writing class, I don't have to spend much time at all, if any, teaching this piece of software. Additionally, I also didn't mention that if you are viewing any of these materials on a mobile device, it is automatically responsive, which is incredibly important and powerful at this moment. That means that once you format it once, whether you formatted it on a phone yourself or on a laptop computer like the one I'm using, it's automatically going to readjust and reformat itself for whatever screen you're on. And so the lesson plans you create now will be able to be read just pretty much exactly the same on your student's mobile device as if they were using a computer, which is why Spark is so incredibly potentially powerful for developing and sharing this kind of content. Right. Now, I also said that we always want to reflect on the affordances and the limitations of any of the choices we make. And so, what are the affordances and limitations of what we just showed? What is particularly important is that your students can participate in the same kind of content making, and to me, most importantly, sharing. If you remember, there's a share button at the top center of that interface for creating a Spark page. And so to me, that's a very different student experience than writing a research paper that's only going to be read by one person. These objects, these modalities are meant to circulate. They're meant to share. At the same time, we have that affordance of that kind of experience. We also have some potential limitations that we need to be aware of. And so, because this is public, because these are URLs, because you're making public websites, we have to consider issues of privacy. In fact, whenever we're doing this kind of work, we want to have conversations with our students about fair use, about privacy, and about accessibility, because those are not going to be universal no matter what you do. And so we have to make choices based upon those affordances and limitations. Now, Adobe Spark page is fairly accessible in terms of ADA principles. Um, the only limitation that I know it has, and I will give you a link in these materials to the accessibility statement, is that you need to put in an alt image tag when you're captioning, when you have an image to caption it, if it needs to be perfectly machine readable in that way. Maybe more importantly is that we wanted to encourage our students to do this kind of work so they start having similar experiences and they start thinking about these issues themselves, and enables you to talk about them in your classroom. So I don't know how advanced folks out there might or might not be in terms of technology. In my experience, there's probably a mix. There's some people who are very comfortable with this, and you might look at Adobe Spark like I looked at it for the first time, and I thought, well, this is so simple. It's not that useful. But I've been actually extremely pleasantly surprised. Like I use it all the time now. In fact, friends of mine who are professional media producer people, they're not outputting work to clients in Spark, but they're getting their work done in Spark all the time because it's so powerfully and elegantly designed from an engineering standpoint. And so you want to think about the affordances and limitations. I've had great success with putting my lesson plans there and in using this duplication sort of strategy to keep them going. And more importantly than figuring out the technology itself is that we've now had the opportunity to have a conversation about how we design a lesson plan, about how we think about what our students are experiencing over the course of a lesson plan. It's given us another lens or maybe another angle to look at our teaching from, and that is very beneficial. And so we may have had, a tutorial this morning or kind of in a webinar experience about using Adobe Spark page, but we also started talking about principles and best practices for designing a lesson plan in terms of thinking of a curtain rising and moving students from watching to doing to teaching, and to be making sure that especially instructors who maybe don't have a lot of experience are also thinking about the way they wrap it up and embed reflection into their student experience. And so there's ideally a lot more benefit to this than just learning a technology, just learning a cool and easy technological solution. And so for those of you who might be advanced users out here, I would encourage you to share the potential of Adobe Spark page with people who might not be as advanced as you, who are looking for solutions to promote exactly the kind of experience they want in the class, other than just pure text processing or content processing. It's again that act of making where things become pretty special. All right, so that's Adobe Spark page. And I'm going to quickly point you to now Adobe Spark Video. Works the same in terms of it's cloud-based. You can have a Spark Video app on your mobile device. Everything I'm about to do on a laptop, you can do on a mobile device. Of course, the screen's a little bit more cumbersome, but it still works the same. Ask yourself, if you wanted to create a video now, what would you click on? You click on Create a Project, and then you click on Video. Whenever you open an Adobe application these days, there is increasing support for people who are new to this. And so what you're going to see is it's kind of walking you through a tutorial, even in just creating something that anticipates teaching you how to use the tool as you're doing it for the first time. So here I'm creating a web video for a project that I've actually been meaning to get to, but I haven't had the time. Now's the occasion. So I published that article that I told you about, 10 Principles for Instructional Technology. And now I'm going to create a quick video version of that. Now, I've been in Adobe Video earlier today, and I'm obviously a user of it. And so if you are a first-time user, you're going to get this tutorial that pops up that takes about a minute to watch that kind of shows you how this all works. Clearly, from the screen you're seeing in front of you, you can pick a story template. I like to always start from scratch before using someone else's structure, because to me, that's how you really kind of learn your way around what the application can do. And so here's this tutorial. I'm going to play it, but then I'm going to stop it because video doesn't stream very well through webinars. But it's 1 minute and 7 seconds long, and it kind of shows you everything you need. So you can add video, you can add slides. It's all organized according to slides. You can reorder the slides once you've created them. You can select themes, and you have more choice than you did in Spark Page in terms of themes. You can resize the video, you can resize the screen, whether you want it to be square or widescreen. You can record voiceover, and we'll walk you through all of those things. You can upload music, all right? And so here we're in the interface. And basically the way Spark Video works is it's a very, very rudimentary video editor. And it's rudimentary for reasons like Spark Pages to try to keep novices and rookies from making mistakes. And so that's part of the affordances and limitations. It closes down pitfalls that you might fall into, which then creates some limitations in terms of your freedom, in terms of how you edit. So this basically creates narrated slideshows. And so what you're looking at here in the middle of the screen is sort of the preview monitor. You see our friendly plus button. We see at the top of the screen everything we saw already: preview, share. You can actually download a video file. Over here, there's more choices: layout, different kinds of layouts, split screen, full screen, themes, in terms of different looks you might want to choose, resizing the screen, whether you want widescreen or square, and then here's how you control the music. And so I'll go back to layout. Down here at the bottom is kind of a timeline, and it already looks like slides. We have one slide here. It's already embedded credits and an outro. And so the name of this project is 10 principles for instructional technology. And I don't like the way that just kind of takes over the whole screen. So I'm going to click split screen, and it's going to give me that format. And then I'm going to add a photo. Earlier I showed you how to find free photos. We can do the same thing here. In this case, I'm going to want to upload a photo. I want to upload a headshot of mine. And there's a picture of me in my documents. I click upload, and there it is. I like the layout of the split screen. I don't like the theme very much. And so I'm going to pick a different theme. I'm going to pick this focus one. And notice how the font changes, and I like that better. It looks kind of cleaner. I don't want blue though. I want to play off this green, and so I'm just going to click the green color over here. And there, I kind of like the way that looks. What's happened is that the other slides are going to now follow this same theme, right? So I'm going to close the theme window, go back to layout. And so we have what could be considered a cover for this video. And so now I have 10 principles. So I want to add 10 slides. And so I'm going to click this plus button 10 times. And see, what I'm doing now is I'm storyboarding this particular video project. I've got a structure to it. And so on the first slide, I'm going to talk about principle number 1. And let's see if you can remember what was the first principle of instructional technology that I talked about. It was to keep people first. And so that's my first slide, content slide. And then I'm going to click on this slide, and I'm going to add the second principle. And that was start simple. And then the third principle was to focus on pedagogy and outcomes. And so you get the idea. I'd go all the way down this slideshow, adding text or images or photos to narrate or to explain the concept. In fact, if I wanted to add a picture here, a photo, we look for the familiar plus button. There it is. I click on it. I click on photo. I'm going to click on find free photos, and I'm going to type in crowd and something that looks pretty human. These people look kind of happy, so I'm going to click on them. It says keep people first, right? And so I can also add little video clips. If I wanted to add a video clip here, I click on video, and I could upload video clips. Now, Spark Video is meant to create short little videos. 5 minutes is probably the upper length of what you want to do. You could, in theory, as I understand it, make a 30-minute video this way. What you can't do is have more than 30 seconds of voiceover on each slide, right? So if I'm going to narrate each slide with voiceover, first you have to have your computer settings right so that the microphone is active and the speakers are right. Once that is correct, you'll notice that there's this microphone record button right here. When I hold down that microphone, I'm going to get a countdown, or it's going to start counting down. And then I just speak what I want to say into the voiceover. So I'm going to do that live for you now. Hi, my name is Todd Taylor. I'm a pedagogical evangelist for Adobe and a professor at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And this is 10 Principles for Instructional Technology. And so I released the button when I was done recording. If I didn't like what I said, I could just click on it and just record right on top of it. That took 12 seconds. Again, each side has a maximum of 30 seconds. And so I'll do a voiceover for the second piece. In 25 years of working with instructional technology, I've found that the most important principle is to keep people first. That is, to use technology to bring people together. And especially in this time of sudden remote emergency teaching, we want to be sure that we're taking care of our students and we're taking care of ourselves as instructors in our move to digitize learning. Now that was horrible, and I would re-record it all over again, but you get the idea, right? Okay, so let's imagine I've gone through all of my slides. I've narrated each one of them. I've re-recorded narration when I didn't like it the first time, the first take. Now if I go here and I click play. Hi, my name is Todd Taylor. I'm a pedagogical evangelist. And we get a preview of what it's like, right? And so we listen to that. First thing we notice is that the audio is too loud. And so I want to adjust the music. I also don't like the music. I think it's a little too jaunty. So I'm going to click on music, and I've already found the music that I like the best. It's way down here at the bottom. It's called Pacific Pier. You could browse through all this music. It's fair use. It's designed for you to include. You can click on this, and I like to put the the volume slider in the top right-hand corner down all the way as low as I can get it to go, so it's not competing with my voice order, with my voice over. If you wanted to, you could just turn the music completely off. Again, I put it on, and there we have it. When I listen to it, it will still sound too loud, but when I export it, it balances better. Hi, my name is Todd Taylor. I'm a pedagogical evangelist for Adobe and a professor at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And this is 10 Principles for Instructional Technology. In 25 years of working with instructional technology, I've found that the most important principle is to keep people first. Right. And so once I've edited all of that together, I previewed it, I've got the music right, I've got the theme the way I want it. If I want to, I can click download, and it will download an MP4 file, and then I can upload that to wherever I might want to store it. You can put it on YouTube, which is especially useful if you want to take advantage of their automated closed caption functioning. I can use Vimeo. I can send it to people if the file is small enough, or maybe even easier and better yet than thinking about downloading the file and then uploading it, I can just click on publish. Again, this is the same interface as we saw on Spark Page. I pick a category, education. I click create a link. And then because it's video, it takes a little bit longer to process. But once that's processed, I can copy the link and paste it into anything. And so here I have a Spark page that I've built called 10 Principles for Instructional Technology. And in that what Spark page, I just simply clicked on video, and I embedded the link that I copied from the video so that it comes out like this. Hi, my name is Todd Taylor, and this is 10 Principles for Instructional Technology. And there you have it. And so the recording of this webinar will include links to everything that we just showed. In the chat pod is a link to this, which is my homepage, that creates a whole bunch, that contains a whole bunch of assets. It creates a link to the slide deck that we used at the beginning of the day today. It creates a link to my lesson plan template. If you like what I did and you want to just copy and paste from that, you're welcome to borrow it. It contains a link to the Spark video that I just demonstrated. It also contains a link to a free OER online textbook called Adobe Creative Cloud Across the Curriculum, a guide for students and teachers. And so this resource is out on the internet. It's available free to everyone. And it talks about in more depth and detail about this kind of work across the curriculum for students and teachers. And so if there are any thoughts or questions you'd like to share with me, we have just a couple more minutes before we have to get off. I thank you so much for your attention. I hope this has been helpful and worthwhile to you to recap or review until I see a question posted. The idea is that we want to create really rich dynamic content for students in a way that inspires them to do so themselves, but in a way that's incredibly accessible and particularly interactive and dynamic. And using Adobe Spark is a great solution for that, because it's free, because it scales to mobile device, the same as laptop. and because it's so easy to use. And so, Melissa, if you're out there, I don't know if there are any questions that have popped up, or if you want to phrase them or rephrase them.
No questions so far, Todd. There was only one about whether this is being recorded, and it is. So.
Sure. All right.
Oh,
I'll hang out here for a second to see if anyone comes up with any thoughts or questions.
yeah. Tracy's asking when the recording will be available. Tracy, there'll be an email sent out to the email address you registered with. It takes about 24 hours. So anyone else have any other questions? Does not look like it. Well, Todd, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. It's great.
Thanks everyone for being here. Look for these resources online, and I hope you send me some examples of the Spark videos and Spark lesson plans that you're creating, hopefully as soon as tonight for your classes tomorrow.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks everyone for being here today. And thanks again, Todd. We'll see everyone next time.
Hi everyone, thanks for watching. Click the link in the description below to explore more free online professional development. Click the link on screen to subscribe to the channel for more videos.